This is a lecture from Open Tuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
Now we come to look at the purpose and process of management. We know that an organisation is a social arrangement for the controlled performance of collective goals. And what management does is it's a method, or can be defined as getting things done through people. So these two come together really. We have people in the social arrangement, an organisation or a business, and we have management of these people in an attempt to get these goals met relatively efficiently and on time and so on. And it's of great importance to try and find out what are the functions of a manager, what makes a good manager, how could we train someone to be a good manager, and so on. And there have been a number of theories that have kind of progressed over the last maybe 150 years. First, we have what was called trait theory. What people tried to correlate really was certain psychological traits to what would make a good manager. Indeed, some of them were even physical traits, like intelligence, being able to show initiative, being self-assured. Physical traits that people tried to correlate with was the height of people and perhaps the colour of their eyes or something of that sort. It was by and large a fruitless task trying to predict who's going to be a good manager from some of these psychological or physiological traits. There are too many variables, ill-defined, subjective, simplistic, inappropriate. Nothing really came of these trait theories, and they've gone. One of the earliest writers of management theory was Fayol, and he wasn't so much looking at what makes a good manager as what a good manager should do, which is maybe a part of the battle. If you could write out here are the functions of a good manager. If you get somebody to carry out these functions, then maybe they will become a good manager, at least a better one. And he is connected with classical management. The term classical management means that these writers were quite prescriptive. Just as in classical architecture, there is a certain ratio that is supposed to be pleasing to the eye, and buildings should be designed like that. In classical music, in a classical symphony, there are ways in which the themes and so on are developed, slow movement, etc., etc. There is a right way of constructing a piece of classical music. So these people, these writers in the classical school of management, said there is a right way of managing. If you follow these rules, you will be a good manager. And Fayol came up with 5 functions, sometimes known as the P, O, and CCC. Like that. He said a manager, the kind of tasks they undertake, are planning, organising, commanding, coordinating, controlling. There's nothing in there that any of us would argue about. However, identifying that you should do a bit of organising and a bit of coordinating and a bit of controlling doesn't necessarily help you to know when you should be doing that. I mean, are you going to set a kind of a timetable and say, now it's 11 o'clock, I better start a bit of organising, or it's now 12 o'clock, I'll go back and do a bit of planning. These functions, of course, will be a bit ad hoc. They have to be approached as needed. Nor does it necessarily tell you how to go about best commanding people. How do you get people to want to do what you say? And one of the important elements missing from this list of 5 is the idea of leading people. You command them, but that's slightly different from leading them, from making them enthusiastic, from motivating them, from making them very keen to do better, and so on. And these old classical management theories left out this element of the social importance, both in what's meant by an organization and then in managing a business. The problem was, to some extent, that prior to maybe around 1850, there hadn't really been perhaps very large commercial institutions around. Most companies were relatively small, and most processes carried on in these companies were carried on by craftsmen who knew what they were doing. When the Industrial Revolution came and you had very large factories of lots of unskilled people, we were in a slightly different ballgame, and the only models that people had really for dealing with large organizations was looking at the military, which was very large, or perhaps looking at the church. And both of those types of organization tended to work, certainly at that time, by commanding, telling people what to do, expecting people to get on with it, rather than making them enthusiastic, motivating them, understanding the human side of it. Also associated really with the classical school was Taylor. Think of Taylor about 1900. He is associated with what was called scientific management. And again, getting back to this idea of there not really had been large industrial organizations. Before there was all craftspeople involved there, managers didn't realize really what they should be doing. Then maybe what they should be doing is telling people how to do their jobs so that the jobs were done efficiently. If you're dealing with craftspeople, a manager, if there even was one, wouldn't dare to interfere with all the skills of a craftsperson and tell them how to, make barrels or weave cloth or whatever it's going to be. Taylor said it is part of the proper function of management to find out the best way of doing things and then instruct their employees to do it. And this is good for everyone. This is going to be good for the company, and it's going to be good for the employee, because it will enable the employee, for example, to make more product. And if you're being paid on what's called a piece rate, if you're paid per unit being produced, then it's going to increase your wages. So what he did was he applied scientific methods to finding out how best people should do their jobs. And one of the examples he used, or one of the examples he investigated, were people who were called shovelers. So a shovel is something like that. It's an implement for moving soil and moving gravel and moving sand manually. And what he did was he did some experiments to find the optimum weight that you should be asked to move. So if it's too light, you're wasting a lot of effort. If it's too hard, you're going to injure yourself. Too heavy, you're going to injure yourself, and so on. And he came out with an optimum weight that you should be able to move on each kind of stroke of the shovel. Let's say it's 5 kilograms. So he said sometimes people are going to be moving material which is a very high density, and you will get 5 kilograms in a relatively small shovel. Other times, however, the material you're moving is relatively low density, relatively light, if you want to put it like that. And to get this optimum 5 kilograms on the shovel, you need a much bigger blade on the end of it. And he said this is the sort of thing management should do. They should investigate the most efficient ways that people can carry on their tasks, train people to do it, and get people to use these efficient methods. So this was a science of work, was applied to job design. It would increase the financial reward that people could achieve, and could also show benefits in the way of arising from cooperation between people, maybe form people into teams as being the most efficient way of accomplishing certain tasks. So the benefits was productivity, wage allocated based on output, workforce care programs to look after staff and so on there, and it would increase wages. The problem was really that this dehumanized work. You were taking out the skills from work. You were telling people, just do this task. He found actually that the most efficient way of accomplishing tasks was to break them down into tiny steps and get one person to specialize in each step. And in fact, it gave rise to, I suppose, what then Henry Ford took up, a production line. And in a traditional production line, you're standing there, the cars come past, and all you do is putting on a wheel. And that's all you do all day, every day, and you get really good at that, and that is the efficient way of doing it. But of course it is likely to be soul destroying. And Taylor was in fact later on denigrated for this dehumanization of work. But I think it deserves to be said that his ambition was to actually improve the conditions of work and improve the earnings that were within employees' grasps. So we know that trait theory doesn't help us very much. We've seen that later management theories bring in the importance of human relations to management. The theory which then developed was known as style theory, in which there are a number of different authors. And style theory says that what makes you a good manager is your style of management. And the great thing about style is we can maybe learn a style or adapt a style to suit people, whereas to some extent traits you're going to be stuck with. Now, there are a number of authors here, and I'm afraid they'll all seem to be overlapping a little bit and so on. I'm afraid you just have to, at some point, put the work in and learn the sort of characteristics or the keywords that they were particularly associated with. And Drucker said that a manager's style should kind of hover or change between three different areas where attention is needed. You have to manage the business. You need to make sure it's going to make the budgeted profit. You have to manage the managers. You have to set the managers' targets and so on, make sure they're coordinating properly and that. And then you have to manage the workers, people beneath the managers to some extent, also need some of your attention. So you might notice that somebody needs some training because they're lagging behind in productivity or keep making particular errors in their job. So three levels: business, managers, and the workforce. He broke this down into setting people objectives, organizing the group, so you have the right people within the group with the right skills. You say who's going to be leading the group and so on. Very important, and what wasn't in the earlier classical theories, motivating and communicating. Making people enthusiastic is now regarded as a very important part of management. Measuring performance, that's kind of old style, but developing people, that's kind of new style. People are likely to be made enthusiastic at work if they feel they are growing in skills and therefore this opens the possibility of promotion or better jobs and so on. People don't want to be kind of stuck doing the same thing day in, day out with no hope of improvement. So developing people's skills, both technical skills and softer skills, is also very important. And managers must try to adopt a management style which gives attention to all of these. Mintzberg, his take on managerial functions were interpersonal, information processing, and decisional. And those are words you need to look at here. So interpersonal roles, these arise from formal authority, status, dealing with information and decision activities here. So this is you in a way acting as a leader, a figurehead, maybe liaising with other departments. This is you, if you like, at the top of the pyramid. Information processing, of course, managers get an awful lot of information coming in, maybe letters of complaints from customers, maybe demands from higher up within the organization, maybe news about technical breakthroughs that have been made in the marketplace and so on. And what we have to do is we have to monitor this information coming in. We have to make a judgment on it. We have to decide whether it's worth passing on, to disseminate it, and so on. And sometimes we need to reply to this information. We need to act as a spokesperson, so that if you had maybe a letter of complaint from a customer, then you would maybe write back to this customer, maybe apologizing or maybe saying why you thought that the letter was, or the point being made was unreasonable. And then there are decisional roles, making significant decisions to improve what's happening. It can simply be, shall we buy a new machine that works more efficiently? Disturbance handler. This means if you've got two employees at loggerheads, perhaps they both want a new piece of equipment and you can only afford one of them, or one blames the other one for making errors and so on. Managers have to step in and handle that disturbance. Resource allocator, who's going to get the new machine? Who's going to get the training? What's your budget going to be? And then a negotiator, both internal and external, negotiating maybe people's salaries, negotiating people's promotions, but also, of course, negotiating with suppliers and customers and maybe other departments to get the work done. Finally, on this chapter, we have got 4 terms that you need to know about. If you have power, then you have the ability to influence people or events. This does not mean that you have the right to influence people or events. And you could think, for example, of a very militant but charismatic trade union leader who can bring his members out on strike, but really may not have even a legal right or a reasonable right to do that. This person is just being unreasonably awkward, shall we say, and holding a kind of gun at the head of the company. But they have power within that. Similarly, you have power, or people have power. If you think of something like TripAdvisor, you say to a hotel or a restaurant, give me 50% off the cost, or I will write you a terrible review on TripAdvisor. There you have power, but whether or not you have the right to exercise that power, simply get 50% off the cost by a form of blackmail, is very different. Authority is the right to exercise power. And really, you want both of these to go together. If somebody has power, they need authority. So you say, your spending limit is up to $1,000. So you've got power to spend 1,000, and I'm telling you, you're allowed to spend 1,000. So power without authority isn't good. Authority without power isn't very good either. You say to somebody, you're the manager, but then everyone laughs at that person. And you've seen that in schools almost certainly. Curious how some school teachers, obviously teachers have the right to exercise power. They have authority. Some also, for some mystical reason, have great power. The class never misbehaves. But some others, it doesn't matter what that teacher says, the class is basically chaotic, because they have not got the power to keep order. Responsibility is accountability. Okay, it's personal. And when we come down to delegation, delegation, getting somebody else to do something, you can transfer authority, but you cannot transfer responsibility. So my boss tells me, you are responsible for having the budgets drafted by Friday, and I delegate that down to my assistant, and my assistant hasn't done it by Friday. I can't say to my boss, sorry, it wasn't my responsibility, I pass it on to my assistant. Because what happened was I passed it on to an assistant who wasn't up to it, or I didn't monitor that assistant, but the buck stopped with me, because I was the one who was given the responsibility or the accountability. So you need to know these four terms and what they mean in terms of management theory.